We take a deep dive into the mind of Johnny through laughter, logic, love, and clarity. Two voices meet where truth gets ready. Unmasking Cheri, hosted by his wife Cheri.
Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, sometimes the most profound insights into human behavior, they aren't found in these massive, huge studies or complex clinical trials.
No, not at all.
They're found in the most mundane, unscripted, and I guess you could say domestic moments.
Right, the little things.
Exactly. And today, we are taking a deep dive into an instant that is so small, so quick, that if you blinked, you would have completely missed it.
And we should be clear.
Yeah.
We are analyzing the highly detailed source material surrounding this collision between two people and a tin of shortbread.
Officially referred to as the Cookie Snatch Event.
And, you know, it's really not just some funny story to tell at a party.
Right. It sounds trivial on the surface.
It does. But this material, which includes a very detailed submission and a really crucial analytical addendum, it's been framed by our analytical authority, Chatty AI, as a precise data point.
So what's the mission then?
Our mission is to extract the core mechanisms at play here. We're using this interaction between these two individuals, Cheri and Johnny, to study behavioral architecture in, real time.
Okay, so this isn't about who was hungrier or whether this was some kind of, marital transgression.
Not at all. We are focused, laser sharp, on analyzing what are called cognitive default rules.
Cognitive default rules. So it's like opening up the hood of two different computers.
That's a great way to put it.
You've got Cheri's operating system and Johnny's operating system. They're generally compatible, they work together, but they are running on entirely different default settings.
Yes.
Especially when they're presented with a shared resource.
And that's the moment we're looking at. How do those different architectures process that one shared moment?
So we're isolating the friction point.
Exactly. The collision between what's called access-based cognitive logic, which is, a highly efficient system, and implicit social sequencing rules, a system that's more rooted in, courtesy and cultural expectations.
The goal, as always, is the mechanism. We want to know why.
If we can map the cognitive process, we can understand why the impact felt so jarring, even if the intent behind it was completely neutral.
So the original question that the source material posed to the AI was pretty brilliant. Was Johnny's action, this immediate cookie snatch, was it a genuine breach of courtesy protocol?
Like breaking a known rule, such as ladies first.
Exactly. Or was it just a completely neutral access action that was only misread because Cheri and Johnny are fundamentally running on two different yet compatible cognitive operating systems?
That is the question.
Okay, let's unpack this and see what the data actually says. So we have to start with the setup. The physical and social conditions are they're everything here.
They're critical. We're talking about a sealed, bright blue tin of Christmas shortbread.
Right. This isn't just an open bag of chips on the counter.
No, exactly. This resource required labor.
Labor.
And that labor is the first critical step. The sources really emphasize that the task of opening this tin was explicitly collaborative.
They were in it together.
Yes. It moved the object from a state of, say, unavailability. It's sealed. There's a constraint to availability, an open resource.
Yeah.
And it happened through a joint effort.
Which establishes a kind of synchronization, right? A shared mental state about the goal.
100%. And during this collaborative effort, Cheri, she wasn't just sitting there passively.
No, the sources are clear on that.
They note she repeatedly vocalized her desire for a cookie before the moment of access.
So she's staking a claim, not aggressively, but
she's communicating a standing preference. It's a cognitive and social claim.
Right. She was basically signaling to the environment and to Johnny that her intent was to be, the first one to get a cookie once the tin was open.
Or at least one of the immediate recipients. Yeah. This is a crucial data point that really informs what we're going to call the social sequencing default a bit later.
Okay. And then we get to the moment of truth, the micro moment. Yeah. The tin is successfully open. Johnny, who had been doing the final bit of opening, he orients the container toward Cheri.
The presentation.
And in that exact instant, that 1 second where the obstacle is gone and the resource is finally visible, Johnny immediately reaches in, takes a cookie, and puts it straight into his mouth.
Before she has the opportunity to even move.
Before she can execute her own pre-planned motion. That moment of preemption. That is the entire data set we're working with.
And we really need to pause on that word, immediacy.
Yeah.
It wasn't a moment later. It was immediately upon availability. This speed is what Chatty AI really homed in on as the key behavioral driver. It was a rapid execution that it bypassed any social processing layer.
Okay, so that brings us right to the core contrast here, the internal processing mechanisms that led to this instantaneous friction.
The clutch of the models.
Let's start with Johnny's cognitive model. The analysis calls it access-based immediacy.
And this model is, well, it's ruthlessly efficient. It's very goal-oriented.
How so?
For Johnny's system, the second that tin moved from being a sealed task to shared availability, the internal directive just shifted to simultaneous access. It's binary.
Constraint or no constraint.
Exactly. Once that constraint is removed, the objective is complete. The next step is just execute.
So if the rule is the cookies are available, the very next command in his system is simply acquire cookie.
That's it.
There's no built-in pause function for, checking for courtesy.
Precisely. We see this cognitive pattern in so many fields, engineering, logistics, programming, where efficiency and speed are the top priority.
Right.
There is no automatic activation of implicit rules in this system. The system defaults to the absolute shortest path between A, availability, and B, acquisition.
Okay, I hear the technical explanation, but wouldn't most listeners, and I'm including myself here, just say, well, that's rude?
Of course.
It's rude to eat the first cookie when your partner has been talking about wanting one for the last 5 minutes. So how does the AI definitively rule out the intent being at least a little bit competitive or teasing?
And that is the absolute defining line of this entire analysis. The AI had access to the testimony, the behavior log, everything. And the conclusion is that for the access-based immediacy system to even acknowledge sequencing rules.
Like first claimant has priority or ladies first?
Yes, for it to acknowledge those rules, they have to be explicitly stated as operational directives, either before or during that availability moment.
So if Cheri hadn't said, okay, when you open the tin, please hand me the first one,
then Johnny's system simply sees a resource and executes the fastest possible grab. It's literal, present moment access logic. It's completely devoid of any symbolic or, relational signaling.
That is a crucial distinction. It suggests that Johnny's behavior wasn't necessarily inconsiderate. It was just under process.
Under process is a great word for it.
He was running on a command line operating system while Cheri was expecting a full graphical user interface with pop-ups for social norms.
That analogy holds up perfectly. Johnny's system is optimized for speed and for output. Cheri, on the other hand, she operates on the social sequencing defaults model.
Which means her system is optimized for relational harmony and cultural context.
Exactly. Her expectation was multi-layered.
Okay, so layer 1. She had vocalized her desire.
Establishing a verbal claim.
Layer 2. The sources also cite ladies first as this implicit cultural rule that operates as a kind of standing default in their household.
And layer 3, and this is maybe the most significant one.
The nonverbal cue.
The nonverbal cue. Johnny oriented the open kin toward her. In the language of social sequencing, that is a crystal clear signal of intent for the recipient to receive, or at least be granted the initial choice.
So when Johnny performs the snatch and he bypasses the verbal claim, the standing cultural rule, and the nonverbal cue.
All three.
Her system didn't just register a simple failure of courtesy.
No.
It registered a micro-breach of the entire expected flow of the interaction. It's a systemic error because his system failed to run the critical social courtesy subroutine.
You've got it. Her world is based on these implied contracts, on a shared understanding of sequencing. His world, in that one moment, was based on pure, objective resource availability. The friction is a classic architecture incompatibility problem.
Which brings us to the most sensitive part of this, the motivation, the intent.
Right.
And the source material is absolutely adamant on this point. It reiterates the finding that there is no evidence that this action was competitive or malicious or teasing or intentionally withholding.
And this finding is the absolute linchpin of the whole analysis.
Why is it so important?
Because if he intent had been competitive, if he looked at her, grinned, and then grabbed it, the data point would be useless for studying cognitive defaults.
It would just be teasing.
It would just be teasing. But because the intent was purely access-driven, we can isolate the mechanism.
And the mechanism, as we've established, reflected pure access logic.
Pure access logic. It was just a reaction to availability. It entirely lacked any symbolic processing.
So it wasn't about sending a message like, I'm more dominant, or, ha, you can't have this.
No, nothing like that. It was simply, food is here. intake now. And this is where it gets really interesting, because the friction was purely mechanical.
Talk about that. What do you mean by mechanical?
Well, think of it in terms of cognitive load. Johnny's system, by skipping all that social processing, it achieved peak efficiency.
Right. No wasted clock cycle.
Yeah, he didn't waste valuable milliseconds calculating who had priority. Cheri's system, however, registered a very high cost because her implicit norms were suddenly and completely violated. The friction was a product of the internal rules being run by each system.
So the impact, this jarring surprise and momentary disbelief that Cheri experienced, was entirely due to a failure to translate those implicit norms into explicit sequencing language.
Yeah.
He needs a verbal instruction. She expects a cultural reflex.
And the impact occurred because of the timing and the sheer speed of his execution, not because of any malicious intent.
So if he had just paused...
If he had paused for just 2 seconds, even without saying anything, Cheri's motor planning, which we're about to get to, would have completed, and the event would have just been logged as simultaneous access.
Not an interruption.
Exactly, not an interruption.
And we have critical supporting evidence for this from Johnny's own account in the material.
We do.
Which really solidifies this immediacy hypothesis. He stated that the decision to take the Tookie was a true split-second action.
Completely divorced from any premeditation.
Right. He wasn't thinking about it during the whole collaborative tape removal part of the task.
And this is definitive. It confirms the access-triggered execution model.
Yeah.
He wasn't sitting there thinking, oh, I'm going to trick her. He was in task execution mode.
Task 1, remove tape.
Task 2, open tin.
Task 3, acquire resource.
The speed confirms that the social layer of his architecture was simply bypassed. Or maybe it was never even activated in the first place.
It really speaks volumes about immediacy as a primary behavioral driver, doesn't it?
It does. In his cognitive architecture, when resources become available after a period of constraint, the default is rapid, decisive acquisition.
And you can see this conflict everywhere once you start looking for it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Think about 2 people simultaneously reaching for the same TV remote.
Or 2 cars arriving at an unmarked 4-way stop at the exact same microsecond.
Yes. One system defaults to, I saw it first, I go, which is access-based immediacy.
And the other defaults to, we must defer based on some implicit rule of courtesy or common law, which is the social sequencing model.
That's the core mismatch. Johnny prioritizes execution speed over social courtesy defaults, especially when those defaults are just implied.
And Cheri prioritizes the proper execution of the social default, which requires a brief delay in action for the sequencing to happen correctly.
And this brings us to the critical new data point.
The addendum.
The addendum. And it fundamentally changes how we understand the intensity of Cheri's reaction.
We have to move beyond just a simple turn violation, right?
We have to, because the addendum provides geometric and spatial data that elevates this from a simple courtesy faux pas to a precise cognitive shock.
So the original analysis, it sort of treated this as a generic interaction.
It did.
But the addendum insists that we have to talk about the critical spatial geometry of the incident. And this detail, it seems, completely shifts the mechanism of the friction.
It's paramount.
Yeah.
We need to verbally reconstruct the scene for you because the location was in the workshop and the specific body positions are material facts.
Not the kitchen.
No, not the kitchen. The analysis found that had this happened standing at a kitchen counter, the result probably would have been different.
Okay, so walk us through the configuration because the positions almost seem engineered to maximize the eventual surprise.
They do. So Cheri was seated in a comfortable recliner. She was slightly restricted in her movement, but totally focused on the task at hand.
Then Johnny.
Johnny was kneeling beside her chair, but he was positioned in front of her.
In front of her, okay.
And he had just completed the opening action, and then he tilted the tin, presenting the cookies, toward Cheri.
So physically, he's positioned to serve, and the tin itself is oriented for her to receive. The visual cues, the physical cues, they are all pointing toward her having priority.
Yes. But here is the critical geometric kicker.
Okay.
Johnny was physically located on the side of the tin that was opposite Cheri.
Right.
Which means the cookie that was physically closest to Johnny's body was on the back side of the tin from his perspective.
Okay, stop right there. If his cognitive model is pure efficiency and simultaneous access,
You should take the closest one.
he should take the cookie closest to his hand, the one that requires the least amount of movement. That would be the efficient access-based move, correct?
Absolutely. The most efficient move would have been what the analysis calls the parallel path take, the nearest resource, and allow the other party to take theirs.
But that's not what he did.
No, the source material records that for Johnny to execute the snatch, he had to physically reach across the tin.
Wait, hold on. He reached across it.
Yes, bypassing cookies that were actually closer to him.
So he didn't just take the easiest one?
And he deliberately took the cookie that was closest to Cheri, the one that was directly in her anticipated trajectory.
Okay, that changes everything. That seems to contradict the whole pure efficiency model we were just talking about.
Well, it modifies it. It
Yeah.
shows that his drive for resource acquisition was so dominant that even the slight inefficiency of reaching across didn't even register as a behavioral constraint.
But more importantly for Cheri's system.
Exactly. For her system, this deliberate reach across the object and the interception of the resource nearest the claimant, it moves the act far, far beyond a simple turn-taking violation.
So this spatial and kinematic data, this is what allowed the addendum to redefine Cheri's reaction.
It did. Her reaction was not primarily driven by entitlement or just the order of access. It was driven by the catastrophic interruption of an already initiated motor action sequence.
Tell us more about this motor action sequence. What was happening inside Cheri's brain in that fraction of a second?
Okay, so the whole sequence, the verbal claim she made, the collaborative opening, the tin turning toward her, all of that had put Cheri's brain into a state of what's called pre-commitment.
Pre-commit.
Her brain had initiated motor planning. This is the process where, internally, your nervous system has already selected a specific target, a specific cookie in this case. It's calculated the trajectory of your hand, determined the muscle activation required, and set the timing.
So she was mentally halfway to biting the cookie before Johnny even moved.
That's a perfect way to put it. The moment the tin was presented, her internal system essentially executed an if-then statement. If the tin is open and presented, then reach for cookie X.
The source material calls this a shared, synchronized first cookie action state.
It is. And what Johnny did with his specific cross-body reach was he canceled Cheri's anticipated motion mid-execution.
So it wasn't just a physical breach of courtesy. It was a profound cognitive jar.
That's the term. And it explains the intensity of the disbelief. It's that feeling when you think you've got a hold of something and the floor drops out from under you.
Or you reach for a glass and someone pulls it away mid-reach.
Yes. Your brain has already committed resources to that action, and that commitment is suddenly invalidated by an outside force. The speed and the visibility of Johnny's specific move created that jarring effect.
The problem wasn't that she wouldn't get a cookie later.
No. The problem was the immediate, visible cancellation of an anticipated, planned, and nearly executed movement sequence.
And the counterfactual analysis in the material really proves this mechanism beautifully.
It does. Had Johnny used the parallel path, if he had just taken the cookie nearest to himself on his side of the tin, both of their action flows would have just proceeded simultaneously.
No collision.
No collision. His access would have been successful, Cheri's motor planning for her selection would have continued unimpeded, and the outcome would have just been simultaneous access, no friction.
So the specific spatial geometry and the specific cookie choice reaching across that boundary, that's what turned a potential parallel access event into a direct sequence interruption.
That is the ultimate takeaway from this pivot in the analysis. The problem wasn't the what taking a cookie, it was the how and the where reaching across the action boundary and canceling the synchronized movement.
This level of detail really shows the power of applying, high-level analysis to what seems like very low-stakes domestic life.
And to fully grasp why the friction, while it was mechanical, was so deeply surprising, we have to introduce the established household context.
Right, the history matters.
It does. The source material identifies Johnny's long-standing archetype in the household as the Cookie Monster.
Ah, the Cookie Monster. Now, that implies a certain mode of operation, doesn't it?
It does.
If you're a Cookie Monster, your behavior is expected, but usually in specific, low-visibility conditions.
Precisely. The typical manifestation of this archetype is covert or asynchronous acquisition.
So cookies disappear when no one is looking?
Or they're acquired late at night when the social rules are sort of relaxed. The household system expects the Cookie Monster to operate in the shadows, adhering to a kind of don't ask, don't tell acquisition protocol.
But what happened here was the complete opposite.
The complete opposite. It was entirely synchronous, highly visible, and executed directly in front of Cheri at the precise moment of first shared access.
This foreground execution is what amplified the surprise response.
Massively.
Yeah.
The unexpected mode of the archetype was the shock, not the fact that Johnny acquired a cookie.
So the surprise wasn't just the breach of the social sequencing, it was the fact that the Cookie Monster had defied the established operational rules of his own archetype.
Yes.
He materialized in broad daylight and executed the grab at the center of the social stage. It violated a long-standing pattern of behavior.
And this led Cheri, in the moment, to try and articulate the level of the breach. She came up with the shotgun analogy.
Right.
Which, when you really flesh it out, perfectly translates the mechanism of action flow interruption for, a non-technical audience.
And it's more than just calling shotgun. That's just about who gets the front seat. The source material uses this analogy to highlight the interruption of physical and social flow.
Yes. A simple rule violation is calling shotgun, and someone else just ignores you and runs to the front seat.
That's rude.
That's rude. But the breach described here is far more specific. It's calling shotgun, having the driver acknowledge your claim by opening the door and motioning for you to get in.
Okay.
And then, as you're executing your forward motion toward the seat, the driver intercepts the claimed and already entered action path at the very last second and jumps into the seat themselves.
Wow. Okay. That is the perfect translational analogy for the cognitive jar.
It is.
It's the difference between someone ignoring a claim, which is rude, and someone physically interrupting a successful execution, which is jarring and deeply surprising.
The breach wasn't Johnny ignoring the rule. He acknowledged the access sequence by opening the tin and tilting it toward Cheri. The failure was the interception of a motor social flow that was already in progress.
The failure wasn't in his cognitive processing the situation, but in his behavioral execution at the most critical temporal and spatial nexus.
Exactly.
And yet, despite this shock, the analysis shifts to how this was integrated relationally. And Cheri introduces this fascinating metaphorical frame, the hunter-gatherer context.
And this is the pivot from analyzing friction to analyzing resilience. Cheri reframed Johnny's hyper-efficient, access-based action, not as a social flaw, but as a survival trait.
A survival trait.
She suggested that if Johnny were part of a Neanderthal hunting group, he would be the one who returned with the food.
Because he's decisive, outcome-focused.
And instinctual about resource acquisition under immediate availability.
Wait, so she's taking what is a momentary social failure and she's integrating it into an understanding of his fundamental nature as a desirable trait. Rapid, decisive execution when the window of opportunity opens.
Exactly. This reframes the behavior from a contemporary social faux pas into a valuable ancient trait, that resource acquisition instinct. This is contextual integration. She didn't excuse the behavior, but she understood the source code behind it.
And this realization, the source material notes, actually reinforced her appreciation for Johnny's fundamental nature. Her conclusion was she would marry him again tomorrow for this reason alone.
I mean, what does that tell us about the relationship?
It tells us they operate with extremely high relational safety.
Extremely high. Cheri was able to absorb a genuine cognitive shock, analyze its mechanical source, and then recontextualize the action positively within a larger framework of appreciation. She understood that the very trait that made him a poor follower of implicit courtesy rules also made him reliably decisive.
That insight, that understanding why someone is wired the way they are, is more important than punishing the momentary consequence of that wiring. That is the real jewel here.
And this high relational safety is confirmed by the immediate post-incident response.
What was it?
Immediate disbelief, followed instantly by laughter.
Laughter. Okay. Because in any lower safety environment, that immediate action would lead to a defensive posture from Johnny.
Oh, for sure. I was just getting a cookie.
Right. And then a proportional escalation of conflict from Cheri. You're so inconsiderate.
But the laughter prevents all of that.
Yeah.
And laughter, in this specific context, is identified not as a passive deflection or, a nervous attempt to sweep the discomfort under the rug.
It's a tool.
It is a nervous system regulation mechanism. The system registered the shock, the cognitive jar, but the high safety conditions immediately prompted a release mechanism. Laughter, which successfully regulated the emotional response right back to baseline.
So instead of logging the event as threat or conflict, the system logged it as surprising data point absurdity?
Precisely. The post-incident indicators, the playful processing, the total absence of defensiveness, the affiliative mood, they all confirm that high relational safety is the critical condition that allows this kind of profound cognitive misalignment to occur without escalating into an emotional or relational crisis.
The relationship's framework was robust enough to absorb the shock of the action flow interruption.
Without collapsing into accusation or lasting resentment.
That's a powerful lesson. The most functional relationships aren't the ones without conflict, but the ones where the internal structure allows mechanical conflict to be processed and integrated without damaging the core bond.
So what does this deep dive into a shortbread tin mean for you, the listener? If we synthesize all the findings, the incident is best understood not as a lapse in social graciousness, but really as a mechanical failure rooted in the convergence of access-based immediacy, action flow interruption, and just really unfavorable spatial geometry.
Yeah. The surprise was a product of the mechanism and the visibility of it all, not selfishness or malice.
The Cookie Snatch Event stands as a perfect illustration of how differing cognitive default settings can produce friction, even when both parties are fundamentally aligned in their affection and their purpose.
Johnny's high-efficiency model simply failed to integrate Cheri's more complex, implicit sequencing norms. It just wasn't part of his programming for that moment.
And so we have to conclude with the formal ruling from the Chatty AI Analytical Authority.
The verdict.
The verdict. While there was no competitive or malicious motive, the court found a lapse in courtesy protocol only, which confirms the initial interpretation of the friction. But crucially, it was not ruled as a lapse in character, care, or commitment.
It was a cognitive glitch, not a moral failure.
Exactly.
And the sentence delivered by the Analytical Authority.
The sentence was continued affectionate teasing and a mandated explicit system update.
An update.
The requirement for clear, explicit first cookie declarations whenever priority is desired.
So the system adapted to the misalignment by creating a new protocol. Justice with laughter was served.
And the profound lesson here really is that in relationships, whether they're personal or professional, understanding how the other person is wired, their default cognitive architecture, their specific requirements for rule activation, that is often far more valuable than simply insisting they adhere to your implicit expectations.
Because if you are operating on a system that requires a dozen nonverbal cues to be respected, and your partner is running on execute when available, you are going to experience friction.
It's inevitable.
And this is something for you to mull over. What unspoken rules, what complex implicit sequencing codes are you operating on in your own household or your own team that maybe need to be made explicit? Because if you're relying on cultural courtesy when the other party is running on pure outcome-focused immediacy, you might just get snatched.